Hello and welcome to the video tarot forecast for the month of May. I can't believe how quickly the time passes. You see a new background, a new home, and I've managed to get most of the chaos out the way so that I can get this to you a little earlier than I did last month. Apologies for that, for those of you who were subscribed then. And so without further ado, let's get on with the reading. I have shuffled the deck, I've set the intentions, and just to recap again, there are three different card positions for the three different cards, each with a very specific meaning. The first card on the left is the foundational card. So that's the card, that's the energy that you are bringing into the reading. It is something that you have experienced, whether outside in the world, inside yourself, with another person, or all three. And it's something that has an influence on the current environment. So it's really the most strongly influential factor on what it is that is going to be happening in the second card, which is the current weather. And so where the foundation then meets the weather, you have this kind of reaction that happens between the two. What you bring in is going to help to define how you experience what it is that's coming towards you or is in front of you. And so the current weather is really the prevailing theme or trend for the next few weeks. And as always, this can be something that continues its influence quite far into the future. So it doesn't just simply end once the 4 weeks are up, but I would say that it is pretty much something that will be a formative experience, something that is going to have an impact on your life in some way. So the current weather then really is going to be it's going to be the prevailing experience that you have in a specific way, and that is the experience that is there to shape your path moving forward and to shape you. So it might be subtle. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, that its effect is going to be small. So it doesn't have to be staring you in the face and screaming at you for it to be influential. And you also don't necessarily need to be hypervigilant about trying to find out what it is. You very often with a tarot reading, we'll get an idea of what something might be, or we'll know immediately, and then actually in retrospect, it's something else that the reading's been pointing to, or it has shown up something that is antithetical to what it is that we thought was going on. So I think that really what I'm trying to say is that there's no need to control any of this, including your perceptions of what could be happening. It's rather more about holding an awareness, and the awareness doesn't necessarily, again, have to be controlling. You can hold an awareness and then also let go of any attachment to whether you are, whether you're correct or not, or whether you were able to pick up on something or not, because everything happens in its own good time for a good reason. That's what I believe. And very often, as I said, you have 20/20 hindsight, and only then actually is it the most useful, the useful way of approaching the reading. It's the reading is sometimes far more useful when you start to see how things have happened, because then that builds a foundation for how you move on from there. So then the third and final card is the one that I give back, or hopefully give you some agency in the reading, or the card gives you that agency, and that's the Tool card. It's the card that where when you have an awareness of what's going on, or where you realize that something that's unfolding is something that is there and reflected in the second card, this is the card that helps you to do something with that, or it helps you to be something in the face of that, whether it's to encourage what it is that's going on, to support what it is that's happening, or to mitigate what's happening. But it's where you become part of the process. It's not just happening to you, but it's also happening through you. And so I know that there's a bit of a paradox there, that you don't control anything, that you don't need to control anything, and yet there's the agency. But there's no way to resolve that. I think the older that I get, the more I realise that I work with paradox. I work with paradox a lot in my studies with Jung, and so there is this simultaneously this holding this acknowledgement that maybe we're not as in charge of things as we like to think we are, and yet still we are the magicians of our own experience. And to find that middle path between both of those two ideas is really where the rubber hits the road. It's where things start to happen inwardly as well as externally. So I'm going to draw the 3 cards. Excuse me, turning away for a moment. And I'm just going to draw them left to right. And as always, I'm going to be turning them over one at a time. So this is the current, or the foundation. It is the 2 of Swords. Here, let me get this closer. So this is something that you're bringing in. It's happened already. As you can see, there is a sense of a passage out or through somewhere from one state to another. It is going to have a mental, intellectual, sort of psychological component to it, one that is thinking based. So let me explain then a little bit about the 2 of Swords in terms of where it comes in the suit itself. It is the first incarnate card in the sword suit. So in other words, the Ace of Swords is an archetype. It's a pure archetype. In other words, it describes everything to do with its suit. It holds everything. It is not in this particular realm of existence. It's not in the realm of our 5 senses. It is in the realm of potential. So it's a blueprint. And then as soon as we go and we draw something down out of that potential, then we are creating something that is it's dual in form, and then comes the myriad forms afterwards. So the 2 of Swords is the first incarnate aspect of Swords. It's that desire or that need to find a balance between something not being here and being here, of being able to strike that balance between the spiritual and the physical. Of finding some kind of temporary way of dealing with the emergence of an idea or a thought or a belief, and that may come from inside, it may also come from outside. But in other words, it allows you to shift forward. It allows you to create some kind of passage through into the rest of the sword suit. So that's a more esoteric way of understanding the swords, but in a practical way, it can be, it's always temporary. All the cards are temporary, but particularly with the 2 of Swords here, a temporary alliance, a temporary contract, something where you reach an agreement, but you also understand that the agreement is only really to get you from one place to the other, as you can see. It can be a way of saying, well, there is the potential for conflict here, but we both agree that there is going to be a certain set of rules or guidelines that apply that will allow us to move forward. It's a kind of card of mediation, really. And it could well be about mediation too. But it does suggest safe passage. It does suggest that so because it's foundational, that you have come from somewhere where safe passage was afforded to you, whether through your own actions or someone else's, whether that was given to you or whether you fought for that yourself and you got that. You are here where you are now because you've gone through some kind of tunnel. I mean, I like the way that the swords form a kind of tunnel. It's that space in between them. There's no conflict. Together they're forming just a passage through, a very narrow one. And so these balloons, well, whether they are coming towards us or going away, we do know that movement is the name of the game here. And also those balloons are in the air, so things are very much still up in the air. And it's only when you find ground, whether it's in the pastures in the foreground or in the mountains in the background, that you start to understand where it is that you really are. The 2 of Swords are just simply trying to get you from point A to point B. And so as we then reach the current moment, then we are reaching point B. And that is the 4 of Discs, or power. Let me get this closer so that you can see. As you can see here, there is a figure in a chair. It's a very, very strong card, a sense of authority there. The colours are strong. It's a very masculine card. Let me explain that in terms of it's not to do with gender, but rather to do with an idea of how we approach things. So if it's more accessible to you, it's a very yang card. It's very active, even though he's sitting actively. He's not resting back like this. He is in a position of authority. In fact, he is asserting his authority by being still. So the authority is not action orientated in a movement kind of way, but action orientated as in, here I am, and this is me, and you are going to have to contend with me. And it's the Four of Discs. The Four then corresponds in the major arcana to the Emperor, and there is something incredibly Emperor-like to this card, as you can see. Except it's because it's a minor arcana card. It's a more specific, narrower version of the Emperor, and as I'll explain, it's something to do with it's not necessarily always the most beneficial position to be in as well. So every card has its light and its dark sides, and in this particular one we'll see why. So to go back, it's the discs, it's material world. It's very often to do with possessions, and that can specifically be about money, but not necessarily. It's interesting that this comes in with the mediation or the temporary alliance card. It could be something as specific as the agreements that have to happen around the things that we own or the things that we accrue or money. So it could be a temporary deal or a temporary hold on things in order to get a better perspective. That could be quite specific, but it can get a little bit more broad than that. So you can think of any kind of alliance that has allowed you then to come to some sense of reckoning with your surroundings. And having a feeling of being able to control your surroundings, which is interesting again in light of the fact that I've been talking about that we aren't always as in control as we think that we are, and perhaps this is also the case with this card, is that with the Four of Discs, there is a sense of, this is mine, these are my things, this is my stuff, and this is who I am, and this is where I am, and nobody is going to come near me. If you looked at the cards, you know, there were 4 discs right in front. It's almost as if they are a barrier to actually, to being able to approach the person behind it. So it's where you actually put physical barriers between you and the rest of the world, or between you and that one thing that you are trying to defend against. And those physical barriers, you can be using your possessions as barriers. You could be sequestered in your house. That can be a barrier. The 4 walls can be the barriers. And that would correspond with the 4 of Discs. But it is where these are not only, they may not necessarily be conscious barriers. So you can put barriers up and say, keep away, keep back. Or it could be that these things, and they will be things, are preventing you or somehow isolating you from living fully in the rest of the world. It can feel very safe. It can feel very contained and very authoritative. But it can also feel very isolated. So maybe here it's about looking at where it is that you have a sense of having this passage into a place where you are feeling safe and feeling very much in your own space, and that this is mine. And that can feel wonderful. I mean, there is a very emperor-like quality about that, and that's not something that I'm denigrating at all. It can be entirely necessary at times. But then to notice where it is that, that this might then cause you to feel a sense of separation or isolation, or to become a little bit of a tyrant around what it is that you are owning. You know, so there's a difference between this is mine and this is mine, and you can't touch it, so you need to stay away from this. And in the process, please just stay away from me too. And again, that could be conscious or it could be unconscious. You could be in a way defending against something that is trying to get to you, but using your things around you and your world as a way, as some kind of buffer. So it's not only an emotional buffer or a psychological buffer. But this is also going to be a physical buffer in some way. It could be that you use your money to separate yourself from others. or to and when I say money as well, it could be that it's that you use every sort of resource that you have at your disposal to do that, or it could be that you use your lack of resources to separate yourself off from others. You'll know. It's very much a card of, again, because it's a 4, it's a pause. So you've got the 2, which is a sort of, it's a moment in time, and then 4s are always pauses. It's sort of doubling up on the 2. So there is this pause, and it's really then about what it is that you want to do next. Given where you are, can you identify this in your current circumstances? Given where you are, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay there? How are you feeling about staying there? What are you thinking about staying there? And what is it doing in terms of your life and when you're staying there? And I don't necessarily, I mean, it's staying there. It can be, it doesn't have to be like, do I need to move house or something like that? I think I've probably thought about that just because I've moved recently, but it doesn't have to be as radical as that. It's more about maybe it's not just say, as an example, not moving house, but rather throwing open the doors and allowing something or someone else in. Or maybe deciding that that's not such a great idea and keeping the door closed. But it's that time of reckoning. That pause allows you to think about what it is that's going on and to then take your next step. It gives you a little bit of wiggle room to decide what it is that you want to do and what's going to serve you. And I would suggest that the way that it's going to serve you is going to look at how it's going to serve you on the level of on the level of the material and everything else, but particularly the level of the material, and then everything else will follow. So that's the current, so I'm going to look at these two together. So you've got the 2 of Swords leading to the 4, and I don't like it when the light catches that. It's interesting, I notice the correlation of the white or the lighter sense of the source of light. And in the 2 of Swords, that's sort of above the mountains, and then in the 4 of Discs, that's behind the figure. So it almost to me suggests that the balloons were moving away from the greener lands and out into the mountains. And then I think about being on a mountaintop and wondering how isolating that could be. Sometimes it's definitely a position of majesty, king of the hill. But then there's also that idea of the very reason why you wanted to get there is to feel superior or to feel elevated or to feel alone is something that it's time to reckon with. Do you need to come down from that mountain to a certain extent? Do you need to strike a balance between what it is that you left behind and where you are now? It might be that some green is being called for. It seems to have been left behind in the second card. So maybe you can carry some of that with you and be able to recreate that in your current life. So those are, well, we'll see what's going to happen then with the final card, which is the Tool. So this is what you get to work with. This is your card of agency. And it's interesting when the card comes up that doesn't seem much like a tool at all. So then we have to approach it in a slightly different way. So 10 of Wands. This is to do with energy. This is to do with creative energy. So this is libidinal energy. And when I say libidinal, it's not sexual energy. It can definitely be channeled into sexual energy, but it is that fire that runs through you that kicks everything off. And it continues, it's not only the initiator, but then it's the fuel for everything that you do. And here, in the 10 of Wands, it's too much. In some way, it has the very fuel or the very energy, that libidinal energy, is now becoming a form of oppression. So that suggests, from a psychological perspective, at the very least, that the energy is going... the energy is being directed in a way that feels punitive or limiting or in some way inflicted, it's a self-inflicted kind of set of circumstances. An example of this would be from, let's go back to psychological explanation. And again, this is only one example. But libidinal energy that is used to oppress is very much the realm of the superego. The superego being that mediating part of us, that inner voice of authority, which works very well actually in terms of the Four of Discs. And I'm looking here at the four sides of the enclosure and thinking that may well be. It's where there is that sense of authoritarianism. Rather than a sense of authority, it's become authoritarian, except it's not only being meted out or dealt out to the people around you, but it's also getting turned in on yourself. I'm not good enough. This is, why am I doing X, Y, or Z? I am worthless. And these voices, this voice of the superego, is not normally our own authentic, well, it's never our authentic voice, but it's not normally our voice at all. It is normally the internalized voice of some person or persons who were influential, particularly younger, that we've made our own, so much so that we don't believe, we don't even think about it. It's so, for instance, I catch myself very often going, oh, Sarah, that's not me. That was very much a voice that came to me from one of my parents. It was, but I will, my parent doesn't even have to be around anymore. I say that to myself, and that in miniature is the idea of the Ten of Wands. It's where creativity, or that energy that we could be using in our lives, and I don't necessarily mean to make art. Our life is our art. So it's something that is in devotion to our soul's calling, to our soul, to who it is that we are. That energy is actually being diverted, and it is coming back at us, but in these inner voices. And these things that we must do, we should do, we shouldn't have done, we really can't be like that. And it's that. And as you can see there with the figure, look how the figure's dwarfed. He's not only dwarfed, he's a shell of himself, transparent. Where is he? Where are you in your life? Why is it that you are trapped in these very heavy stone walls? And why is it that your own energy is being used against you, and you are the one who's doing that? So that's not necessary. That's not to lay the blame, but rather, and here's the pain in the ass thing when you grow up. It's that you are not necessarily to blame, but it's definitely your mess to clean up. And so it's the responsibility that one takes. So the tool here, I would say, is to be able to look for those places where it is that you trap yourself with, or your energy is focused intensely, but in a way that confines you rather than liberates you. And so it is to notice the feelings, the self-talk, to notice the actions that you do across all of all the suits. So the feelings, the cups, the self-talk, the swords, and the actions are to do with discs, where it is that you keep yourself small, that you keep yourself confined, that you tell yourself that you deserve nothing better, and therefore, and what will happen is that when those 10 wands are pressing down, there can be a feeling not only of enervation, in other words, a loss of energy, a tiredness, a fatigue, but also a feeling of not being able to get out of it. And so the bad news is that it's your task to be able to identify where this is happening, and it's your task to get yourself out of that. But given the fact that you have an emperor-like quality, then maybe it is actually where you use your materiality to help you get yourself out of that, whether it is to open a physical or a psychological door, whether it is to use what you have, your resources to seek help, to get support, to stop getting cut off from the things that you thrive on, the things that feed you, and to be able to then hold that awareness in your physical body of where it is that you are feeling the 10 of Wands, and then being able to take steps to do that. So the good news is that the Ten of Wands is the end of the line in terms of the wand suit. It is where there is too much. It is just too much bearing in and bearing down. It will have to change. It does have to change. It's that idea of being able to shift out, and the time is ripe for that to happen because it's a 10. It's almost saying, there you go, you are realizing that you can't go any further with this particular way of being, way of thinking, of the way that your energy is being used up against you. And so then it can shift. And then if you go to the tarot deck and you count out the court cards, which I see as separate, the next card from a chronological perspective from the Ten of Wands is the Ace of Cups. So there's that idea of bringing in, oh, and there it is. There it is. Let's see, get rid of the reflection. Of that love, of heart opening, of being able to, oh, I thought that was going to drop down there. It's, again, aces are non-incarnate, so it's what you do with it. It's how you use it. And actually that's quite a good thing. It's standing in potential. So you can continue then to endure the Ten of Wands. For how long, I don't know. It can't be that long because first of all, this reading, I think, has kind of shifted. The reading itself is a kind of a call to the fact that it's the end of the line for something. When you start to see it, you can no longer allow it to continue, really, just simply through awareness. It's not because there's any control, but just bringing awareness to it means you catch yourself doing something all the time. And when you catch yourself doing something, something will inevitably change. And so the Ace of Cups being the potential is then, what are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do with that ace? How are you going to use it? Where is this heart opening going to be? And the ace, again, for me, the Ace of Cups is connection to soul, it's connection to self, it's connection to purpose. So it's reconnecting with something that was causing you to be that you were isolated from at the top of the mountain as your emperor. Like, these are my things, this is my stuff, and also, you know, my stuff. My inside stuff is the stuff that's keeping me back as well, and shifting into being able to work with something that's wholly more expressive from an emotional point of view. So it's going from that the thinking and the energetic based cards into the feeling based cards, and so that 10 shifts into the Cups territory. That's the sort of that's really what's implied by the Ten of Wands. It's what comes after that. And that's a different kind of experience. But I think it's worth bearing in mind that the Ace of Cups is love, so people think, well, then love, and it's just going to be love and, you know, romance, and that may well be true. But it's also heart opening. And when hearts open, a lot more feeling comes in. And some of those feelings are the ones that you've been trying to possibly, defend yourself against. And unfortunately, when you defend yourself against some of the supposed negative feelings, you can't be selective. You also defend against the ones that are there that nurture and grow you and feed you, and are the ones that are expansive. So the defending, unfortunately, keeps everything at arm's length. So when you open to, and you will have the emotions move through you, but then you also get more in touch with yourself and more in touch with what it is that lies at your heart, at the heart of you, the Ace of Cups. I know I'm spending a lot of time on the Ace of Cups because that Ten of Wands to me feels like it is pointing Ace of Cups, Ace of Cups, Ace of Cups. So that is the reading for this week. For this month. Yeah, my mind is still in movement mode, and I will send this off now. It's quite an intense reading, mind you. I can't think of a reading that isn't intense at times. But if you do feel like connecting or getting in touch, then just email me, or you can you can put a comment below the video if it feels like something you want to share with others, but otherwise email me. You can go to the website www.integratedtarot.com and send me a message there via the contact form, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. But otherwise, I send this off to you with lots of love and happy adventures, negotiating your way around your fortress on the hill, finding out what works for you, what doesn't, and stepping into some form of liberation where you can step out of that stone chamber and into more of yourself. Okay, see you next time. Goodbye.